Is that all you want, Steve?
All I want is to enter my house justified.
Power of the Wild Bunch is that Peckinpah says, look, I know this is anachronism. I know this is fascist. I know this is sexist. I know this is evil and out of date. But God help me, I love it so.
Defining just what this series is from the beginning has been quite difficult. It's not a historical account of action cinema, but more like a journey through the films that influenced me, someone that hopes to become an action filmmaker. This is simply a very personal look through the sequences that stuck with me, the ones that I took it on myself to learn from, to watch over and over again, muted, frame by frame even, and what I learned from that process. But today's episode is going to feel a little different. It has become the first part of episode 5, as the more I looked at our main subject today, the more I just wanted to talk about him. So, the rest of the exploration of this era will follow soon. But Sam Peckinpah, or Bloody Sam as he'd sometimes be known, more than deserves his own episode. I hope you'll stay with me. There aren't going to be many conclusions. There may be a few contradictions. When discussing Sam Peckinpah, you shouldn't expect anything less. I want to explore some things, jam if you will, so settle in and join me as I noodle my way through a time of brutal masculinity on film. When making films long before YouTube even existed, I seemed to just want to make action. And now, even in some small way, be it writing a Bruce Willis geezer teaser or shooting my own fight sequences, I have been able to dip my toes into the world that has interested me. The directors that really influenced me most, when it comes to actually being on set, to writing action, were the craftsmen. Those directors who worked efficiently to overcome obstacles, short schedules, low budgets, and still made thrilling examples of what we now call action films. When I first started reading about directors, shaping the director that I hope to become, it was the Eastwoods, the Spielbergs, the Friedkins, and the Peckinpahs that inspired me.
I was doing a scene in the park. What happened is it started pouring rain. So I decided to go ahead and shoot the scene with me sitting in the middle of the park with the rain storming down on me.
He loves you.
I know. I read the note on the refrigerator.
Because he was able to live with the elements and know how to heighten the scene, it actually became like much stronger of a moment.
When shooting Asir, I had just 2 relatively short days with a small crew. It became clear that a large piece of choreography that we had planned, which you can see here, was going to take about half a day to get right. And due to starting late for reasons out of my control, I now needed to get it done in 30 minutes, with no plan of how to do that. So, I just made up JP Lee crawling from one point to another in this shot to get him thrown into this position. It was simple, effective, narratively sound, and worked. I actually prefer it to the over-choreographed beats we had planned. It was trusting craft and knowing that sometimes you just have to get through your days on your feet that solved a potentially huge problem. It was a moment, whether it's even a sequence you consider particularly good or not, that I felt like a director.
Peckinpah's genius for improvisation made whole sequences appear to materialize out of thin air. It was that way with the bunch's final march to their deaths, which was a scant 3-line description in the screenplay. After they'd filmed the bunch moving to their horses to get their guns, the assistant director, Cliff Coleman, began issuing orders for the next setup, which was supposed to be the bunch's arrival at Mapache's courtyard. But Sam stopped him.
No, Cliff, wait.
want to do a walk thing first.
These were the moments Coleman had learned to dread.
What do you mean? A walk thing?
Peckinpah growled something unintelligible, then began lining up Holden, Borgnine, Oates, and Johnson to make a long, long walk past the outlying buildings with their shotguns cradled in their arms.
So where did these craftsmen that inspired me come from? Within the 50s and early 60s, some directors strived to communicate to audiences with violence, and thus action, even under strict moral controls. Trained up by directors like Howard Hawks, William Wyler, John Sturges, figures like Don Siegel, Sam Peckinpah, and later Clint Eastwood, John Flynn, Walter Hill would elevate heroes, or should we say anti-heroes, with precise, efficient filmmaking that would come to rouse and even shock audiences, filling cinema at a time with stars and increasing bombast as TV seemed to threaten the future of film exhibition. Prescient, huh? It is overly complex for me to talk here about quite what happened to turn cinema from this to this. But in 1966, the 36-year-old production code was revised, with in 1968 a classification system from G to X being brought in. And right in between those events, this happened. It is hard to overstate the impact of Bonnie and Clyde. I cannot imagine how it must have felt to sit in a cinema back in 1967 and see this happen in a packed cinema. That it occurred in what is a truly great film with fantastic actors and a real budget is still surprising. Where Roger Corman did do something quite similar in the same year in a film that, while certainly not bad, for me lacked the same quality, Bonnie and Clyde was the cinematic watershed moment of the 60s, and it changed everything. Robert F. Moss wrote in 1980 for his article The Brutalists, Making Movies Mean and Ugly, of Pursed this integral cinematic moment. Subsequently, Sam Peckinpah, the principal hierophant of movie violence, who had been obliged to curb his most sanguinary impulses for years, was allowed to direct the shamelessly genocidal western, The Wild Bunch. Peckinpah maintained that he had not seen Arthur Penn's film before finishing The Wild Bunch, but other sources dispute that. Wild Bunch's wardrobe supervisor Gordon Dawson said that Peckinpah referenced Arthur Penn's film while making The Wild Bunch, and there's a letter dated March 19, 1968 that seems to confirm that a print of Bonnie and Clyde was to be sent to Peckinpah prior to shooting his film.
Knock the hell out of it!
I don't just bring Bonnie and Clyde up in reference to Peckinpah's use of gore, but also his filming through multiple cameras and his editing in this staccato style.
Some people say I broke those rules first. I certainly did not. I mean, the Russians broke those rules, and the Germans broke those rules. This was nothing new, but it was new for Hollywood.
And when asked about his concept for the scene, Penn referenced a very key influence of Peckinpah's, and many of the other filmmakers discussed throughout this series. Having seen enough Kurosawa by that point, I knew how to do it. We can actually see Arthur Penn too playing with ideas in an earlier film with Paul Newman, The Left-Handed Gun, that Peckinpah would pull from again, for in my opinion, his greatest work, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Full circle themes of iterating on what came before to find fresh innovation rear their heads again.
No! I heard him! Keep down! Billy, we gotta help.
Throughout this series, I have discussed Sam Peckinpah's editing of action scenes, at times somewhat negatively. I've just always found, as much as I do love his work and his editing, especially in The Wild Bunch, that the cutting back and forth between points at different speeds, essentially leaping back and forth in time during already chaotic action scenes, to be jarring. There is nothing wrong with doing something creative, or of course innovative, but I do have a preference for the sort of editing, especially in action, that feels invisible.
Whoa, we're not just gonna let you walk out of here.
Who's we, sucker?
Smith and Wesson and me.
I don't notice this sort of jarring effect with the work of Eastwood or of, say, Kurosawa or Wu. But I do feel it when watching Bloody Sam.
Behind you, Mike.
I think maybe Clint is the last vestiges of the golden age of the Hollywood studio film. First of all, the invisible editing. There's a simplicity to the style. His personality as a filmmaker is not forced on you. And that for me is in the tradition of a Wyler or a Ford.
But is being brought out of the moment a bad thing, at least in Sam Peckinpah's case? To discuss his editing of action, one also has to discuss his bloodletting, and something I have touched on throughout this series: intention. I am a proponent of the theory that action should always reflect character and story. I just don't really love when it's only action for action's sake. Give me a single take action sequence any day, but make it mean something. This is to show the reality of what Odaisu goes through, the pain he'll endure, for what we come to discover at the end, to make a certain revelation all the more shocking, along with of course making us believe that this once isolated man can perform the actions he needs to by just showing to us him doing it for real. This, I'm not as sure means any more than...
Ain't it cool?
As a US Marine, Peckinpah maintained that he saw things that shocked him, though it is generally agreed that he never actually saw what we might call action.
I think Sam's violence within himself came from his many experiences that he encountered during his life. He was in the China Marines, he did, I believe, and I've only just recently learnt because someone's writing a book on his life and has talked to many of the Marines that he was with in his China days, and apparently he observed some very horrific things that were going on there, and he was deeply troubled by them.
And this was before he began to see throughout the 60s events that would continue to shock him. In August of 1969, he actually wrote to Roman Polanski, Sharon Tate's husband, regarding her murder at the hands of the Manson family, maybe someday someone will find a path of reason through the insanity that surrounds us. And in 1971, while in England working on Straw Dogs, Peckinpah sent a telegram to President Nixon urging for a full investigation of the My Lai incident in Vietnam.
Violence ain't pretty. He didn't show it to be spectacular, I don't think. I believe it was to show the horror of what this stuff is like.
When it came to the Wild Bunch, Bloody Sam had a lot to say about his quickly infamous sequences of violence, beyond really what anyone had seen in American cinema outside of maybe Herschel Gordon Lewis and the aforementioned Bonnie and Clyde, regarding why he seemed intent on attacking the audience with such ferocity.
I made the Wild Bunch because I still believed in the Greek theory of catharsis, that by seeing this we would be purged by pity and fear and get this out of our system. I was wrong.
I don't think anybody's ever accused me of using violence for its own sake. It's more a question that if they see it clearly enough, they'll recognize the violence and then understand themselves and be able to deal with it. But I think I've failed in many cases.
Peckinpah maintained that due to the violent images on the news at the time, in real life, he wanted to use cinema to remind people how shocking violence actually is. His intention was to jar people. It wasn't far off what Michael Haneke tried to do, in my opinion, rather bluntly, in Funny Games, but back in 1969. Having intention in your action is of such tremendous importance. And it is absolutely fascinating to me that Peckinpah strove to create scenes of such power, to make people feel unwell, to jar them, to sicken them even. He did indeed help shape fantastic characters, and then put them through absolute hell, giving the violence incredible impact. And in a way that reflected perhaps the chaos of reality, the idea that some moments could stay with you for life, to feel like it took minutes for something to pass when in actuality it was only seconds, or that something might occur in the blink of an eye, yet burn into your retinas.
I want them involved in it so they can smell it and know what it is, how it feels, how it smells.
Imagine now if someone truly nailed the feeling of warfare, of chaos, but in what we might call a standard action film, without glorifying it. Saving Private Ryan's opening sequence, but in a modern neon-lit hallway. People have come close, but there is always the Hollywood of it, the fun of it. Tarantino showed in an inventive manner, in a way that rocked audiences, just how painful a gunshot would actually be.
But you ain't dying!
But he also made his violence cool, and why not? Preaching to us was not his intention.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because it's so much fun, Chan! Get it?
Sam's weaknesses were his strengths, I think. The slow motion violence, you know. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it threatened what he was trying to do, I think. It came close to glorifying the thing that he was trying to warn us about, I think.
The thing is, Bloody Sam's violence isn't shocking as much as balletic. It's masterfully constructed. He put a lot of effort into how to capture it and displayed it as such. And though it did perhaps sicken some in 1967, people did quickly come to love it, and so it also became his trademark. Peckinpah is a complex figure with complex contradictory ideas, and his values were a constantly moving target. He has made incredible films of rich moral argument, which remain powerful in their ability to force debate even today.
Let's do it, Charlie.
But he lent on the same ideas of apparently trying to show the reality of violence, even in more commercial ventures like The Getaway, a film that more than any could be seen as him doing it for the money. Is that hypocritical? Is it incredibly subversive? Is it exactly what I hope people will do nowadays in contemporary action cinema? I don't know. But I think about it every time I see one of his films.
Don't do it. Don't. Just run away. It's now. Run away!
Let me dwell on that. I don't just watch his action. I don't just enjoy it. I think about it. I think about why he filmed this scene with 5 cameras, 2 running in slow motion. What did he want to capture? What did it mean to him? What was he looking for? He makes me think through his action.
It's a pessimistic film. It's black and there is not much hope, and the violence is a reflection of that, certainly.
If you ever want to see a film at the time that does aim to show more the true violence and pain of gunplay, inspired again by figures like John Ford Kurosawa and Peckinpah, you can see it in John Milius's underrated debut, Dillinger.
Damn it! Johnny!
He doesn't want to make violence beautiful the way that Peckinpah did. Instead, he stresses the painful reactions of victims, like he does here, to the violence and the bullets and so forth that are hitting them.
You must be Burris.
That's right.
I'm glad it was you.
And for all of the infamy that surrounds his staccato editing, roaring violence, and depraved characters, Peckinpah also knew the importance of slowing down, of letting things breathe.
What I'm afraid of is the tendency for everything to go by quickly. I'm afraid of what it does to the culture, consuming something and throwing it away, as opposed to being enveloped with something. Taking the time to see and experience time in a different way.
The head of the studio, the chairman of the company, after he'd seen that, and he said, "What the hell was that scene about?" I said, "Well, Jim, that's a scene designed to really illustrate the existential sense of violence in the West." And he said, "Existential sense of violence? Get out of here."
I've spoken a lot about Sam Peckinpah here, and without much conclusion. You've heard his name a lot. I wanted to explore his work, the way that he explored violence, through action filmmaking, to make points that were muddied and unclear, with craft that was startling, ambitious, and brilliant.
And I had a telegram from Orson Welles saying he thought that it was one of the finest war films ever made, which was a particular enormous good kick in the ass for me.
And finally, instead of drawing any conclusions as to what he wanted to achieve, even of what you should learn from him, I just say go watch his work, read about him.
I'm Cable Hogue.
Whilst I end this section with his inimitable words via some quotes from an interview he did with Playboy. Peckinpah. Alright, let's get it on. I promise to do my little number, but I'm not going to talk about violence. Playboy. Then we might as well not begin. That's fine with me. Why don't you want to talk about violence? Because that's what everybody's trying to nail me on. They think I invented it. They think that's what I'm all about. They think I get my rocks off when the people in my pictures get their heads blown off. I'm pretty goddamn sick of it.
I think Sam would probably have been pretty depressed by the state of film today and the state of our nation, you know. And I don't know how hopeless he would be about it. But I have the feeling, just based on my knowledge of what he valued, you know, that he would be demanding that we at least try and be accountable, you know. This song makes me think of Sam somehow. It's called Slouching Toward the Millennium. It's time for truth, the barker said, and poured himself a beer.
I was told that I had a particular style. I said, yeah, really? Because, you know, I couldn't care less. It doesn't concern me. I don't consciously work out anything. All my guts, all my life, everything I am is up on that screen. So every morning you get up, you commit, and you do the best you can, that's all. It's all there. It's right there. Everything I feel, everything I am is there.
No, there won't be no demand for midgets anymore. We used to be a novelty by simply being small. But next to them, unholy man, now Tiny Tim looks tall.
And it's harder to matter at all when it's all coming down.
And it's all coming down.
You still got your duty to